Well, hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining me from. Welcome as we go through part 4 of my recent book, the Leadership Intelligence Handbook. It's become an important part of what we've been doing with leaders and coaches because it's a 4-step process. First, self-awareness goes into that. There is, the book has 300 pages, 196 situations and strategies to help you navigate your leadership situations or your coaching situations. So part 1 is your self-awareness. And if you haven't taken advantage of Lisa, our leadership intelligence self-assessment, right? And you can come here and register. You need to give us a valid email in order for us to send you your report. And Lisa will take you through those gaps in your self-awareness. So if we go back to the book, go back here, then the book starts with your self-awareness. Part 2 is about observable behaviors. So your ability to then translate your awareness into what you observe in others so you can predict behavior. Part 3, we get into the leadership style to influence the outcomes that you want to get to. And now we are doing part 4 of the book, which is really, I'm into chapter 2, week 2 of a 9-week series. And we're really diving into the implementation of those 3 things into your organization so that the outcomes happen, right? So get the foundation right, build on your self-awareness, your ability to observe that in others, and your leadership then is important in how you influence and impact people in your organization. All right. So I should check. I think I've got a thumbs up. People are joining. Welcome again. And let's dive into this. So let me turn off this for now. So we'll just do that and get the tech working. Let's see if it's going to cooperate. All right. So the execution gap is really what we're talking about through part 4. And last week we touched on processes. This week we will then look at the execution and the disconnect between strategy and execution, why it happens and how to overcome that. What are the principles that you can follow to fix that? And we see this a lot with many organizations. They spend a lot of time discussing strategy, making plans, and they get stifled. They don't exist. They don't persist, I should say. So the importance to remember is, in all that we do with behavior intelligence and leadership intelligence revolves around specificity as opposed to vagueness, abstract. Strategy can be abstract, goals can be misinterpreted. All of these things, we need to get to specificity, and that's why AccuMatch has become so valuable in organization and in coaching, because it gives us that clarity of a specific score in a particular situation, particular instance. So if you haven't done your AccuMatch, at least do your leadership intelligence self-assessment, Lisa. It's just biqorg.com/Lisa, right? And enjoy your self-learning. So today, I'm going to cover 6 principles, right? And they are about the journey of transferring strategy into execution. So we'll talk about the translation, I'll talk about the cascade effect, the calendar, the milestones, the decision making. All of these things are really part of that process that you need to think about when you want to implement new strategy, new ideas, new goals, new anything, right? Okay. And just be careful also of the word new, right? So you could be using words like improvement. It's less drastic than change or new. Okay. So starting at the beginning, principle 1, the translation process. So what does that mean? Well, we often throw out words like innovation, growth, and we don't take the time to translate that into behavior, right? So there's a lot of excitement around the concept, the strategy, the potential. It's really exciting for those first few moments until you see people getting back to work and the meetings are the same, the behaviors are the same, nothing changes. And so when you ask the question, what do we need to do in order for it to actually translate into new behaviors that will get those outcomes that you're looking for? So language is important. You need to take that innovation, for instance, and turn it into, a specific behavior that you can observe, right? So this is why we spend so much time on self-awareness. You need to understand how you function, how other people function, how you are observing that in order to predict behavior, and then your leadership style, and this is the impact of bringing that together. So if you're going to have a customer focus month, then you need to specifically dive into what that looks like. What's the behavior that you're going to be looking for? Is it call 3 customers every week? Whatever that is that you can measure, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but if you can measure it, then the journey, measuring behavior towards the journey of the outcome that you want to achieve. Okay, so select one strategy, okay, and ask yourself the question, what would that look like if I observe people doing that? What does it look like, right? Pick 3 to 5 specific points that are measurable, that you can count, and you can actually see that translate into the outcome and the journey rather than the accounting that happens after the fact, which is totally useless because you can't change the past, right? So I digress, but here are some examples. Collaboration. Let's set up a cross-functional check-in twice weekly, right? In one of my projects, it was doing that daily across multiple continents, actually, on that project to get people talking daily and not wait for the weekly that was looking in the rearview mirror and there was nothing you could do about what happened already. So agility, if you're going to follow the agile methodology, what are the decision points? How quickly do they need to happen, etc. If it's quality or if it's growth, all of these things need to, they're great words, are very exciting. But people translate them into all kinds of different things based on their own experience. It means something different, okay? And we'll talk more about that. And this is actually what we're talking about next is the cascade effect, right? So KPIs is a really good example, right? The executive team set revenue targets, and the targets just never got met. Nothing changed because there was no behavior related to that. But when we look at the cascade problem is goals tell people what to achieve, but not how to achieve them. And when we talk about behavior, the behavior is the observable actions that you can see that it's actually taking place, right? Misalignment down the hierarchy chain, right? So yes, when you set a goal, right, you need to go through each level of your organization, because each level is going to interpret that in their context of their role in the organization. So it has that cascade effect. You need to define behaviors at each level in your organization, so that the bottom function feeds into the next level, that feeds into that, and it all feeds up into that goal that you are trying to achieve. So if you don't define those behaviors, those measurements, right, the two go together. I've talked about this many times. We talk about business intelligence, we talk about technology, AI, we talk about all these things. And we need to talk about behavior intelligence. They're the two BIQs for me, business intelligence and behavior intelligence working together in order for your organizations to succeed. So you need to look at all of those levels so that the cascade effect happens. It can happen upwards or downwards. Both ways are really the way you need to look at this. Okay. So for each level, define 2 to 3 key behaviors that will be your indicators that things are moving in the right direction, right? So that you can see that progressing through that. So example here is, maybe at the executive level, it's a monthly customer advisory board participation, right? At the director level, you need weekly reviews. At the manager level, you'll need daily customer triage situations. And the front line, right, they need to log every customer interaction every single hour. So they need to pause to do that. Those are the behaviors that can lead you to monitoring that and seeing the progression, because when you monitor it like that, you can actually act early on the things that are not contributing to that, or things that you didn't think of, that you go, oh, we're actually not picking up the right information at this level, and it's never going to cascade to achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve. So you need to do these things in order for that to happen. Then you dive into what are people spending time on, and we often talk about doing a time study, right? It's really a calendar audit, right? And that calendar audit tells you where people are spending their time. So if you put a strategy in place, but as soon as people walk out, they get back to their meetings, they're working 50 plus hours a week, nothing's changed, it contradicts the stated priority, the goal that you want to achieve. So if you don't take a look at what people are spending time on, and even the structure of the meetings, what are the people spending time on in the meeting, right? So there's all kinds of information that you will get. But more importantly, it's not about you getting that information and then mandating it, as we've talked about in other sessions. It's the awareness that they will get from seeing what they're spending their time on and seeing where it's not aligned with the goal that's being set. So they can actually then co-create and collaborate with you to correct that, to contribute to that, so that you all work together in that direction, right? So that misalignment is important, but the way to overcome that is take calendars, get them categorized, the actions, the time spent on different things can be put into categories that you can measure. And then, are you spending enough time on those strategic tasks becomes the next question. What percentage of time is spent on those? Which meetings have no strategic connection whatsoever. They're just firefighting or whatever, right? So understanding that is also important. Right, so protect some time for the strategies and allocate that clearly within the time spent per week. So time that people record, track, etc. Behavioral milestones. So the next step in this is looking at the milestones that lead to that. And milestones are also behaviors. We used to just think of milestones as achieved completions of certain things, but you can't achieve those without the right behaviors, or they will lag the behaviors, right? So just like we talk often about accounting at the end of financial year, we'll look at the year that's gone past and we go, oh my God, we should have done, could have done, all those kinds of conversations. Nobody can change the past. And so we shift accounting to weekly, monthly tracking of numbers to see that we are progressing, so that when you're falling behind, what you need to do to pick that up, and being proactive rather than reactive or just lagging way behind. And the same with these behavioral milestones. If you want to achieve your strategy, your goals, you need to have those milestones. You need to track them. You need to use them to predict the future outcome, because that's what they tell you, right? You can see it. If you can't observe it, you can't see it. It's not going to happen. So behavior milestones precede the results. So if you watch that and you track that, you are bound to hit your targets. Okay, tracking behavior, the frequency, not just the results. Doing weekly check-ins. Nobody spends enough time on this stuff, but they spend a lot of time often complaining about how they're not hitting their targets, right? Take that energy and put it at the beginning and work with the behavior, work with the team, and you will get your results consistently, okay? So identify the outcomes and list the 3 behaviors that will tell you that you are headed in the right direction. They just need to be tracked. You need to have a simple tracking mechanism and a weekly review of that. So an example again, if you want to increase revenue by 20%, then what's the activity that needs to take place when you look at the different levels of your organization? Is it 15 prospecting calls daily? Is it 3 proposals? Is it the follow-ups? What is it at all of the levels? Because we've already talked about cascade effect and the importance of that. Principle number 5. Making strategy visible in decisions. What does that mean? It means if your decisions don't align with the strategy, if you are practicing the wrong decision-making focus, like here, right? Long-term growth, right? Every budget decision favored short-term savings, right? As opposed to growth. There was no investment funded into growth, but it was all spent in cost-cutting, efficiencies, all of these things. So no wonder the strategy wasn't achieved. Growth couldn't be achieved whilst focusing on cutting back, right? Okay. So the decisions you make and the decisions your executives, your team members are making impact your strategy. And if you're enforcing and allowing those decisions to take place and they contradict your strategy, then what are you saying about the importance of the strategy? You're saying it's not important. Forget about it. Just keep doing what you've always done. We'll figure it out later. Or it doesn't work that way, right? So strategy and the misalignment become important in that whole process, but the decision alignment is critical. So set up a check to confirm and ask the question, what decision are we making, and is that decision aligned with the strategy? Okay. Now, they don't always have to be aligned, but you need to at least have 20% of those decisions aligned with your strategy, right? Okay. Because that 20% translates into the 80% that achieves your goal, all right? Okay. As opposed to the 80% that you do, which only keeps you within that 20% of sustainability. So 80-20 rule always applies in some case somewhere. So think about that. Which strategy are you going to focus on? Which ones are you going to reinforce? What decisions are they making, right? What message does it send about that? Is it properly managed? And now, once you've done all those 5, you get into the feedback loop and the importance of positive or negative feedback. And if you know how the brain works, whatever we do, if it doesn't get rewarded either positively or negatively, right? Nothing changes, right? In fact, the brain will dismiss things that don't get rewarded. That's how we survive. That's how we grow, how we evolve. We do something, we get positive feedback, we go, oh yeah, I should do that again. You get a negative feedback, you go, oh, the brain goes, I'm going to avoid that, right? Or I'm going to try to do that differently, see if I can change that to or tweak that to improve the outcome instead of getting that negative outcome. So you need to establish feedback loops to align with the strategies and the goals and the behaviors that you are observing. So if you're doing all the tracking, you've put in place the hierarchical behaviors throughout the organization. You've got measurements in that. You understand the importance of the decisions, the meetings, the time spent within people's calendar. All of those 5 things that I've just talked about, now you get to rewarding that so that it becomes the consistent automatic behaviors within your organization, right? So if you want something to become automatic, what do you need to do? You need to do it, repeat it multiple times over and over and over again. If you want to change the way you brush your teeth, you need to start practicing and holding yourself accountable to doing that the new way and tracking that and actually rewarding that by, looking at your white teeth or whatever as the outcome from that. So if you don't do that within your organization and reward it, it will be forgotten and people will always go back the brain is lazy, and it will always go back to the thing that takes the least effort. And in order to make something move into a least effort, you need to practice it so it becomes automatic, unconscious. Okay. All right. So feedback loops are important. Whether you're depending on the role and the function, everything needs to feed together. So your weekly quick wins feed into your monthly progress review, your quarterly strategy review, and your annual feedback. And all of these are critical components of the whole process, right? Naming the specific behaviors, creating a language. And again, going back to Acumatch, what we've seen with Acumatch is the language that's in the map, the specificity about the specific behaviors, sorry about that, means that people start to speak that language. Oh, that was a towards, or, oh, look, this person is taking time to reflect, or here is their quality control coming out. All of this language starts to become the observable behaviors that then cause the organization shifts, the strategies to become real. So wrapping up what we covered today, week 2, this is part 4 of the book, chapter 2, and we've touched on a few different areas, from the translation of the vague abstract labels that we give strategy, goals, outcomes, and translating them into observable behaviors. Looking at the hierarchy within the organization to understand the cascade down and the cascade up, if you like, doing the calendar audit to see if people are spending time on those right areas, setting the milestones that allow you to make sure that you are headed in the right direction, and confirming the decision-making process to make sure decisions align with your strategy so that it doesn't undermine that. And finally, the feedback loop. So those were your 6 steps today. I hope you've enjoyed that. Your action item this week is pick one strategy, define 3 observable behaviors, even if it's just for a small group or an individual, whatever it is. If you want to achieve your goals, your strategies, you need to do that. Next week, systems, we dive into that a little bit more and how they shape the results more than people, okay? But again, business intelligence, behavior intelligence, that's really what we're talking about. If you have questions, I'll be online. And let me turn this back on in case anyone wants to learn more. Oh, that's the books one. We want the events. So join me next week as we dive into chapter 3 of the book. All right. So good luck. Put those into actions, and I look forward to your questions and feedback as usual. Thank you.